Welcome to the Genius Talk podcast. I'm your host Atul Raj from the bestemailmarketer.com, and today we have Scott Maderer with us. Scott, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So, for our listeners who don't know you, can you tell them who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Scott Maderer. I'm located in Texas in the United States, and currently I'm a full time coach. I work with clients all over the world. I call myself a stewardship coach because I help folks master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out their calling. We can talk more about what all that means, but my commute's really good. I walk 30 seconds down the hall, and the coffee's better in the break room. I can tell you that too.
Okay, so what was the moment or season in your life that led you to create inspired stewardship instead of staying on the corporate path you were on?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was in corporate at the time I actually started the business. Before that, I was a school teacher. I did that for 16 years. My wife and I went through kind of a financial crisis of our own where we were really struggling with money. We weren't communicating about it. She was protecting me by not talking to me. I was protecting her by not talking to her. We had more debt than I made in a year. This was back when I was still a school teacher. And I was actually suicidal because of finances. My wife and I were nearly divorced because of finances. And eventually some things came into my path, and I began to hear some messages about you could do something different, you can behave different, you can act different, you can live different. But part of that was I would also have to come clean and talk to my wife. So I literally took her out and we sat on the back of the car down by the lake and had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I actually came clean and explained to her everything that was going on. Of course, my wife is a smart lady. She actually knew everything that was going on long before I told her. But like I said, she was protecting me and I was protecting her. We realized we were going to have to live different. We were going to have to communicate different. We were going to have to radically change the way that we were living. We did that. And part of that transition, I actually left teaching. I went into the corporate world and began to kind of climb my way up the corporate ladder. And as I was doing that, and as we were doing that, people would come to us and they would go, okay, y'all are kind of weird. Do you think you could help us be weird? And out of that, the coaching business was born. It literally came because people started asking for help, and I realized we could help them. And my wife and I began to do it first as a ministry. And then eventually I realized, hey, I could do that as a business. We kind of transitioned into doing it more as a business part time while I was still working the corporate job. So I climbed my way up the corporate ladder and then I climbed my way back down. It took me over a year to leave the corporate position because I had to train my replacement and do all of that because I was kind of in a key position. And eventually in 2017, I took the coaching business full time. So really the coaching business was born out of that personal journey where we struggled and we started doing things differently and people started noticing.
Okay, that was a really good origin story. Okay, so you talk about helping Christian couples master time, talent, and treasure. So, how do you personally define each of those for someone hearing this for the first time?
So, time, talent, and treasures, the reason why I talk about that is that's kind of shorthand in a lot of Christian environments for stewardship. People will talk about those areas, but really they're just representative of how we live our life with intention. So, if you think about it, whenever people say something's important, like they say, hey, my family is important. Okay, great. Show me your checkbook and show me your calendar, and I'll tell you whether you're lying to yourself or not. Because if you say family is important, but you miss every single one of your daughter's soccer games, is family really that important to you? You know, if you say family is important, but they're things that they need or they want aren't showing up in your finances, are they really important to you? Same thing for you could say health is important or faith is important or whatever. I don't care what you say. What I care is what you do. And often what you do shows up in your time and your money. So they're really more symptoms than they are causes. And what I mean by that is people think they have a time or a money problem. The truth is, it always comes down to that third component, talent, because time and money is obvious. I've got time, I've got money, or I don't have time, I don't have money, I'm busy, I'm that kind of thing, I'm broke. We say things like that. The talent is really the key because that's all the stuff about your mindset, your behavior, your habits, your beliefs, and those drive everything else. So usually when you have a time or money problem, you don't, you have a self problem. And when you look in the mirror, the bad thing is that's the problem. But when you look in the mirror, the good thing is that's also the solution. Because as you change your mindset, as you change your beliefs, as you change your habits, as you change all of that stuff, then the time and the money begin to get straight and serve the right way and become the master instead of the slave to your time and to your money. Because so many of us right now feel often like we're a slave to time or money. We're everything is about what other people tell us to do as opposed to what we actually value and what we really want to do. And so truth is I really only work in talent, but I talk about time and money because that's what people perceive as the problem.
Okay, so can you share any of your favorite client success story?
Sure. So this is actually I share this client story in the book Inspired Living that I wrote. So Peter and Allison are a great set of clients. They were in their 30s. They had some big goals about paying off their house and getting into a position where the wife was a nurse and she wouldn't have to work as many extra shifts because she was working tons of extra shifts to bring in extra money. He ran his own little business, but he kind of felt like it was struggling. It wasn't sure if this was the right thing to do. And again, really the problem, they thought it was around money, but really it was around communication and it was around getting on the same page and having unifying around what their real goals were and what was important to them and what wasn't important to them. So I've been working with them. I'm still working with them. I've been working with them for a number of years now, and it became clear once they got aligned, all of a sudden they made huge progress. So they did end up paying off the house. They actually got to a position where the wife could have left the job if she wanted to. And what's interesting is because she can, she doesn't want to, because now she's in control. She doesn't feel like she has to work. She's working because she wants to work. His business continued to grow and go up in size and get more stable and all of these things. The payoff showed up in those tangible things, but the real core changes were all internal.
Okay, so was there a specific struggle you and your wife faced with money or time that later become a core part of your current coaching framework?
Yeah, so earlier when I was talking about the time my wife and I went through a financial struggle, that
Mhm.
is really where the framework comes from. This idea of so the framework I teach, or one of them, there's several, is to first invest in yourself, then invest in others. That will allow you to develop influence, which will impact the world. What happened is that's exactly what happened with my wife and I. The first step back was to invest in ourselves, to figure out what was important to us, what was valuable to us, what information did we not have. And what we discovered is it really wasn't an information problem. We knew what to do, we just weren't doing it. And so as we began to put tools and systems and habits and communication and all of these other things in place, that was the invest in ourselves part. As I said, people started coming to us and going, "Hey, can you help us do that?" And so we began helping other people. That's investing in others. From that, I began to get influence because now suddenly people recognized me as somebody that could do this. They would tell their friends, they would tell somebody else, and I would get a new client that came along and went, "Hey, can you help me too?" And so all of that began to grow, and that's where the impact comes from. That's what it's allowed me to write a book. That's what's allowed me to develop the kinds of frameworks like you're talking about. So it did come out of my own story, but it came out of that idea of recognizing that it all starts with coming down to where you are and figuring out what's going to work for you. There isn't a one size fits all. Everyone does it the same way. Everyone has the same goals. Everyone has the same pattern. Instead, it's frameworks rather than processes. So frameworks apply everywhere, where processes only apply if you're starting and ending at the same point.
Okay, so many business owners say, I have a time I have a time management problem, but you often suggest it is something deeper. So what is usually really going on when someone says they don't have a time problem?
So a lot of times when people think they have a time problem, they'll say things like, "I'm just too busy." I mean, think about
Mhm.
it. Busy has become a badge of honor, right?
Yeah.
If somebody looks at you and they go, "Well, I'm too busy to do that," we almost kind of sympathize with them. And we usually say, "Oh, yeah, I'm busy too. I get it." pat, 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 too bad, so sad, you're too busy. That's kind of what happens. Imagine for a minute that if you're sitting in a cubicle and you're typing away, you're doing your
Mhm.
job and you're typing away, and your coworker comes over and goes, "Hey, don't you have to leave so that you can go to your daughter's soccer game?" And you go, "Yeah, but I'm just too busy." They go, "Oh, yeah, I get it. I'm really busy too. I'm so sorry." And they go sit down. They leave you alone. So what I point out is it's usually not a time problem. It's a prioritization problem. Because no matter what, when you do something, you're making a choice to not do something else. You're prioritizing one thing over another. So imagine for a minute if instead of saying to your friend, your coworker, "Hey, I'm too busy," if you looked at your coworker and you said, "It's really not a priority for me to go to my daughter's soccer game." All of a sudden your coworker would smack you upside the head and go, "Dude, go, leave. Your work can wait." And truth be told, you'd make
Yeah,
different
yeah.
decisions too, because you'd look at it and you'd go, "Yeah, you know what? I could probably come back and do this work after I go to the kid soccer game," or I can figure out another way I can come to work early tomorrow and finish this up. You'd figure out another way because you would recognize that it's a priority. And that's actually one of the tricks I tell people: change the language. No longer say, "I don't have time for that." Say, or, "I'm too busy for that." Say, "That's not a priority for me." The funny thing is you'll make different decisions. Okay. And
Yeah.
if you say that out loud to someone, they'll think differently about your decisions. And so all of a sudden it kind of pressures you to
Mhm.
do things correctly. So the point is, it's not a time problem. You've got the same amount of time no matter what. You got 168 hours in a week. We all do. It's all about what choices you make with that time. And so the choice is actually the problem, not the time.
Okay, so when a couple is constantly fighting about money, where do you usually start? The number, the habit, or the beliefs?
Yes. And the reason why I say that is it's a feedback loop. We think of things like they're a line, first you change this and that changes this and that changes that. It's really a circle. And if you think about a circle, it kind of doesn't matter where you begin on a circle because it all comes back to itself. So it depends on the person as to where's kind of the end. What is an area for them that connects. Now, usually, okay, it's around habits and beliefs, but not always. It can be in other areas. I've got a couple right now where we're really working really hard on communication and literally stuff around how you talk to each other and what words do you use, and almost playing referee with them a little bit
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms
yeah.
of language, because for them that's the core area. A lot of times for other people it's around habits because, for instance, they never look at their money. They never make any decisions. They never make any plans. They don't look at whether they're on track. They have no system and no habit set up to kind of check in on themselves. So that could be an endpoint. It may be beliefs. Maybe they grew up in an environment, and this happens a lot in couples where like one member of the household grew up in an environment where they never had any money, and the other one grew up in a household where money was never a problem. Now all of a sudden, their worldviews, their beliefs about money are completely different because they grew up in different environments. And so we may have to unpack and kind of go, okay, great, but what beliefs do y'all want to have? Forget what beliefs you grew up with. Y'all get a chance to form new beliefs. And so we may start working around that area. So it's literally anywhere in that loop can be started along with other places, because a lot of times these things reinforce themselves. If you act a certain way, you begin to believe that that is true. But if you believe a certain way, then you tend to act as if that's true. So it's a feedback
Yeah.
loop between all of this stuff.
Okay, so what is one simple money practice that has the highest ROI for your clients over the long term?
Really just getting into that pattern and that habit of make a plan, execute on that plan, review and reflect on what happened. Did it work? Did it not work? What was right? What was wrong? Revise, change, and then repeat. Do it again. And the funny thing is, and by the way, that works with time too, as well as money. It's this pattern of plan, execute, review, revise, repeat, that framework that allows you to get better and better and better over time. By the way, for most people, a lot of people will make a plan and they'll execute on the plan, but that's where it stops. They never actually review and reflect and revise and repeat. They never look at it and go, what did I learn? What information came in? What was right? What was wrong? Because over time, by the way, you can't only do this once because guess what? Your life changes. My wife and I are empty nesters now. Our kiddos moved out. Our life is different than when he was 4, Our
Yeah.
money decisions are different than when he was 16, because life changes. So that's why it has to become a habit of doing this all of the time. And you can't really ever relax from it. And that allows you to continuously improve by little small steps over time.
Okay, so for our listeners who want to connect with you, want some help from you, where can they go?
So I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners. So if you go over to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just put it /genius, what you'll find there is a page that has some free resources, as a place that you could connect with me. It actually has information about my book that I mentioned earlier, my podcast, and other things as well, if you're interested in those. And you can find all of that over at inspiredstewardship.com /genius.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for putting the landing page for my listeners. Okay, and
Absolutely.
thank you so much for joining too. It was really fun chatting with you.
Thank you.
This is Genius Talk Podcast, and I'm your host Atul Raj from the bestemailmarketer.com, of course. So, speaking of email marketing, if you got some questions, challenges, doubt, or just simply need some help with your email marketing, then reach out to me at atul@thebestemailmarketer.com and I'll be happy to help.